Our next guest is a TSN hockey analyst, a former Vancouver Canuck, and Jessica's husband for the last 4 years, Mr. Frank Corrado. How you doing?
I'm good. Why
what's
why all of
the
a sudden are we talking about my
marital
significant
status?
other here?
Oh, you know what they say, Frank. When a player gets married in the summer, expect a poor season the next
Is that
year.
what happens?
That's what Punch Him Lax said.
That's what they say, hey? And I don't know how you guys felt when you got married or whatever, but nothing really changed for me. Like life went people would ask you all the time like, "Oh, how's it feel to be married?" I said exactly the same as it felt like 2 days ago or a day ago. I don't know what would possibly change in your life. Like when you're engaged or you're living with someone, that's it. That's the show. Like there's just because you did a ceremony and you had the reception, like what are things just changed now? Like what changes? I don't understand it.
Honestly.
He's a can kicker over here, Frank. He's just kicking that can down the road.
Frank, honestly, I couldn't have said it better myself. I say those exact same things. We're not religious. There's not kind of like any kind of spiritual fulfillment that either of us are going to get if we get married. All we're going to do is cost ourselves a lot of money on the party.
Oh, buddy. Yes, you will. Yes, you will.
Of course, if we were to do it, we're not going to do it at a Frank Corrado, Italian-Canadian, Woodbridge, Ontario level wedding.
Here's where, this conversation will really take years off your life. When it's time to talk about flowers and you're asked your opinion on the flowers and you say they all look nice. I just don't want them to be too expensive. But your opinion is wanted. And do you like, and the names are out there. Do you like this one or that one? And I'm like, I don't know. They look like flowers to me. Can we just keep them within a certain price range?
Right.
So that's quite the conversation.
Your opinion was wanted until you talked about price, and then your opinion wasn't wanted.
You just answer everything spectacular, amazing, honey.
Yes.
What do you want? Spectacular,
Okay.
amazing, honey.
So, how about this one? Morning of my brother's wedding, and one of the groomsmen says, Maddie, did you get the cigars? And I went, oh, shit, yeah, probably should get some cigars. Well, so I emergency trip, to the closest place that has cigar selection, right? Like I'm not going to a corner store because it's the wedding. And so I'm sitting there counting up the groomsmen and counting up the friends table. And like, it occurs to me, like, I need like 40 cigars. And suddenly I'm into $800 of cigars.
Yeah, that's too much.
Yeah, you
for the
are.
wedding on the morning of.
Yeah.
Just the number of expenses.
Well, I'll tell
The
you this one.
expenses that hit you with the full-on marriage wedding is incredible.
I had very, very few responsibilities for our wedding. Like there was nothing that was entrusted upon me, and rightfully so. But one of the things, just show up and make sure you look half decent. One of the things that was kind of put on my plate was the transportation, the limo. You cannot mess this up. It goes from point A to point B. It needs to be here at this time. It needs to be there at that time. Like that is, I nailed it. Like really good.
And the
Got it
logistics.
great.
So, yeah,
Unbelievable. But I heard a story from a buddy of mine who had the same kind of thing. It's like, I'm trusting you with one thing. Here it is. And he didn't tell the company that this was for a wedding. He played coy. He's like, we need it to show up at this time, at that time. And I guess the driver showed up and saw everyone all dolled up for the wedding. And the driver said, you didn't tell us this was a wedding. He goes, okay. So he goes, well, you're not paying the wedding rate. You're paying like the whatever rate. It's like, so you mean to tell me driving from point A to point B
changes?
Is different? Yeah, the price is different just because we're wearing tuxedos and dresses. And yeah, they just mark things up. It is semi-criminal.
Wow.
What happens?
It is criminal.
Industry.
It's a license to print money. They have brainwashed people about this activity. If you're not religious, it is a crass legal ceremony surrounded by family members.
We've screwed up making a podcast company. You make, this is a little tip for those of you looking for careers out there. Pets, babies, weddings. That's the holy trinity of how to make money in the world. Pets, babies, weddings.
Yeah.
License
You nailed it.
to
It
print
is
money.
a license to print money.
Yeah.
Like I know some really frugal older men in my family, and on wedding days, the rules do not apply.
Yeah. Anyway, why are we talking about this?
Well, I'll say
because
this. My wedding was unbelievable. We had such a good time, and the way our wedding
Really
worked, it was like the first time that people were really like let out of the cage post COVID. You know, because we got married in 2020. It was a small ceremony. It was June of 2022, and we had 250 people there roughly.
Oh, wow.
And it was like everyone's kind of welcome out of the house moment. So it was rowdy.
That's
it was
good.
a good time. Yeah,
That's
it was
good.
good.
That's good. We're talking about this because Punch Imlach versus via Terry Jones is concerned that McDavid and Draisaitl both getting married now.
So this is how the Canucks win the Pacific Division.
Because Punch used to say players don't play well the first year after marriage.
How'd you play the first year after your marriage? How'd you think your hits on SportsCenter went?
I think pretty good actually, because now it was like everything was a little more real. It's like we gotta, we just had to pay for the wedding. We probably got kids in the future.
Yeah.
So it's like you get your ass in that studio and you talk about the Canucks and you talk well about the Canucks and you talk about the Leafs and you make it count, So it was I don't know.
Unlike Leon and Connor, you did not have 10-year, $12 million per year deals signed as well.
I was living on a prayer, just living life on the edge.
To bring this first full circle, how does it feel to be married? Pressure. I'm under a lot of pressure, man. I've got to be good when I talk about the Canucks.
That's another reason why you're avoiding this? The pressure?
We have commitment.
All that matters.
We have
That's all you need, buddy. Don't let society bully you into doing something you don't want to do.
Thank you, Frank.
Okay, let's weave this into a question for you at the very least. You guys are humans when you're in the dressing room. You do have personal pressures. How often did you see a teammate, and I don't mean like mental health issues, like of course that's going to affect the guy's play, but did you know that there was a guy who was seriously distracted by relationship drama? Did you ever feel like a guy was like, oh, it's messing with his game, like he is wrapped up in it?
Yes, for sure. But it wasn't because the person was married. Like if you're with that partner, pre-wedding, engaged, post-wedding, it's the same. You're with that partner. The relationship is the same. Nothing really changes just because you slapped a label on it. But it always amazed me. Not so much that where you could kind of maybe you heard rumblings. There were some issues, and the guy at the arena was like, "Doesn't bother me. I go out there and I play. No distraction." It's like, how does that not consume, everything you're thinking up here? Because I would be the type where it's like that might completely affect me. But it was so impressive with some guys where it's like, yeah, that's at home, not bothering me. Like, and maybe the arena was a little bit of an escape for you, and you didn't have to think about things there, and you could compartmentalize a little better. But I don't know. I don't think the label changes anything. And I think as far as, team bonding and team camaraderie, it's still there. You're still going to be on the road with the guys. At home, you're still going to have your stable of guys that you might do stuff with. It's not going to alienate you. And if it does, alienate you, if you have to go home on the road and go to your hotel and have an hour and a half FaceTime call just because, if there's no pressing matters or, issues, it's like, that's kind of your own fault for not setting that boundary. I don't think that's a byproduct of just being married. That's just, you didn't set a boundary early on in your relationship.
If there was any truth to what Punch was saying, it would be about kids for me, not about marriage. Like the first year after you have a kid, like there's actual new responsibilities, new things to do.
And there's less sleep
too. Like, can you imagine, Frank, with twins, what that would have been like during your playing days? If you've got to go on the road, if you've got to practice and all that sort of stuff.
I can't. I honestly, I honestly can't imagine right now, and probably you would make certain arrangements, like you would in your
Get a
you're making
nanny.
NHL money, you would
Yeah.
have to have the night nurse, you would have to have the full-time nanny because, you need to understand that, from the time you wake up at 7 a.m. on a practice day, you're locked into hockey until the time you get home, which is maybe around 2, and
Yeah.
then you can be dad and do your recovery and all that kind of stuff. But then, next day's game day. So you're nowhere to be found. You're there, but you're not there. So that's where it would be a little more difficult. But like I said, you have to make the arrangements. When it comes to the relationship, you have to kind of not set the tone, because that sounds a little archaic, but it's like, here's kind of the way things have to work, and we both have to be okay with this and on the same page as it. And then, there has to be that light at the end of the tunnel, I think, where it's like, if we really lock this in, if we and I can really maximize things, there's guys, you have a good NHL career, you can make between 20 and 30 million, never have to work another day in your life, and from the time you're 35 until whatever, you're living a great life together.
Yeah.
So it is a little bit of like if you can get your partner to understand that there is a short-term sacrifice, and team bonding is part of that, your play on the ice is part of that, but can live a really nice life for a long time. Your life is longer after hockey than it is during hockey, but you
those
really,
5 to 8
you set
years
yourself up.
those 5 to 8 years until that moment, they can seem like a really long year
I
for the
bet.
wife who's home alone a lot.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Did you used to did you used to nap on game day, and did you do that at a hotel, or did you go home to do that?
I never really had a reason to like leave the house, right? I know some guys during the playoffs like the hotel just because there's no kids, there's no distractions. Maybe honestly, even the blinds are better. Like you can get a good nap, so, like something as ridiculous as that. But no, I was always a nap guy during game days. Except for like there was times I just literally couldn't sleep, and then I would just lay there and close my eyes for a bit, and then scroll my phone and get up and get ready to go. But all the married guys that I remember playing with, I think they were just, my routine kind of has to go on for the sake of, my career and being successful. And, there is, with this conversation has to happen with mentioning that it is a big sacrifice for the family and the
Oh,
wife and the
for
kids. Like,
sure.
you don't see dad a lot, and even sometimes dad
Mhm.
is there, and it's like you're there
Mm.
but you're not there. So it's not easy, and especially with young kids, how do you convince or persuade a 4 or 5 year old that, hey, like, we're gonna play later, or like there's some negotiating that goes on there. It's hard for them to
Yeah.
understand that, right? So I think there's a lot of sacrifice from a lot of people when it comes to the family stuff and successful hockey players.
What about this? Because this cropped up on Canucks Twitter this week with regards to Jake DeBrusk. What about overzealous fans, Frank? Or even
Yeah, what is
stalkers?
that? I saw that.
Did you see any of that in the NHL? Just
Not firsthand. Like I think you might hear more like digitally, like, but you can just block people now. If
right.
someone wants to spam your inbox with, stupid messages, or be a little overzealous that way, you can just hit the block button. I don't know, like stalking has such a weird, creepy connotation to it that, someone's like sitting outside your apartment building, or they're showing up at the same coffee shops or restaurants you're always going to. That is strange. But I think, the way teams are set up now, and this has been this way for a long time, every team has like a security person. It's just one
Right.
phone call away, and they kind of can take care of things, the right way, obviously. And these are, would be retired detectives or retired police officers, and they're basically committed to the security of all the players and staff on the team 24/7. So there are avenues, the correct avenues you can go through to kind of make
Mhm.
sure that
Yeah.
that doesn't affect you.
On to back on hockey and the Oilers and Canucks. Where do you think the gap? Well, first of all, where do you think the gap was between the Canucks and Oilers this year through the playoff series, and where do you think it's gone in the offseason based on what each team has done?
Because leaning on the marital status probably is not going to be
Yeah.
enough to narrow that
Yeah,
gap.
probably not.
No.
I'm not sure the Canucks can look at it and go, McDavid and Draisaitl are getting married. We're winning the Pacific again next year.
Yeah, exactly. Well, with those guys getting married, you have to think that the Canucks are running away with the Pacific, based on that.
Plain as day. Plain
Yeah,
as day.
based on that logic.
Everybody knows this.
Listen, the gap is pretty close. We saw that in the playoffs. Like it was, it's a shot here or a game there, and it's the Canucks moving on and not the Oilers. So, with the Canucks looking like a better team, and I know, some people may not think so. I do. I think the Canucks are a better team on paper this year than they were last year. The gap should be pretty close. The other thing that comes to mind when I think about them closing the gap is, the $11.6 million player for the Canucks has to play that way. He has to be a superstar because Edmonton superstars, those guys seldom take a night off. And when they do, the team has a hard time winning, but those guys are just so good. So, Pedersen has to be Pedersen that makes 11.6. I imagine JT Miller's coming back the exact same way that he left off. Brock Besser, had a career year last year, and I expect him to be more like last year's Brock Besser, not the previous 2 seasons Brock Besser. Like all those things would need to happen, but I can see the Canucks being right there with the Oilers. The Oilers are probably still more explosive offensively, more dynamic offensively. Their blue line kind of is what it is at this point. Like it's not getting any better. It's just, it stays stagnant. And, for the Canucks, I would say the same is probably relevant to them, with the additions that they made and the subtractions. Like there's not that much of a variance there. So I think we're going to see a very, when it comes to the race between those two teams, I think it would be very similar to how things kind of ended off this year, where it's close. It's close down the stretch, and that's very complimentary to the Canucks because Edmonton was one win away from winning a Stanley Cup, and it's a team that has the best player in the world, and on any given day, the player who might be considered number 2 in the world up front.
Who outside of DeBrusk, which was your Canucks your favorite free agent signing from the Canucks?
I thought the Heinen signing was good. I think there might even be, I think he had 17 goals last year. Like there could be a little more offense there. Like he's good with his puck touches. He's a pretty smooth player, and the fact that you didn't blow all your money on one scoring winger kind of allowed you to do the DeBrusk Heinen thing, and just having the swap out basically of Lafferty, Mikheyev into DeBrusk and Heinen and Sherwood. It just I like the fact that there's more opportunity now to score up front. And the blue line, like the blue line signings aren't overly exciting, but they make sense and they're logical. Like Derek Forbort, when he was playing at his best in the NHL, is a big, strong guy. Like he's, he takes up a lot of space. He's rangy. There's nothing wrong with that. Vinny Desharnais improved a lot in Edmonton, especially with the puck. So there's, I think there's even more potential there once he starts working with Gonchar and Adam Foote to see what he could be as a defenseman. But the Heinen one for me is the most exciting one because, I think you were going to get your one scoring winger. Like I'm classifying, as far as the open market, right? Like Jake DeBrusk was your target. That's your number one guy. But to bring in another player, maybe not like DeBrusk, but similar, who can maybe get goals, maybe get you 50 points at $2.25 million. I think that's something to be excited about.
Everybody's convinced there's one more big move left by this management group, and not immediately, but sometime in the next 6 months, mid-season perhaps. Would you be surprised by that and try to get in their brain? Do you want to do that in the summer, or do you want to see what shakes free, who panics, after 2 months of the season, and maybe there's new talents available that doesn't seem to be available right now? What do you think the timeline is on the next splash by this management group?
Well, first of all, I would not be surprised at all because, it seems like Jim Rutherford, he's ready to rock, man. Like he wants to pull the trigger and have, big moves, big names, all that kind of stuff. But I don't think it's just about the headline for him. Like I think they're
Right.
logical moves. It almost feels like it's plug and play with this team. It's like player X goes out, player Y comes in. Zadorov is out, Forbort comes in. Ian Cole is out, Desharnais comes in. Like it's just piecing the puzzle together, which is seemingly what they do. So if I'm, taking a look at the roster, what's the next puzzle piece that is coming out, and what is that getting replaced with based on the history of their pattern and how they do things? It's not super evident to me right now what that would be. So that would lead me to believe that it probably is a little bit of a longer timeline, Blake, where you're going to go into the season and kind of see, okay, what do we look like? Where are we lacking? Where are we doing well? And they've shown, this group, that they're not afraid to make a trade during the regular season when maybe things are quiet. Like they will be the ones to get the ball rolling. They will be the ones to set the market. So I don't think they should be in any rush to do things now. And if you're just kind of playing with the lines, um, you know, Miller, Besser, Hoglander. Like, do you want to see what that looks like? Do you want to give him more of an opportunity up there? Like, is Pew Suter going lower in the lineup? Like, I just think there's a lot more that you can do with the lineup now. So I would maybe try and focus on that first before I make the external kinds of moves.
The risk is, of course, you don't start well and then you look desperate and then maybe you don't get the same leverage, right?
I suppose, but I don't see, like, I guess I don't see this team not getting off to a good start. Like I think they would get off to a pretty good start, and even if you tread water for a little bit,
right? Average start is fine. Yes.
Yeah, like even an average start is fine. You need to catch fire at some point. Then you need to catch fire at the right time, and ultimately put yourself in a playoff spot. And with the way the things line up in the playoffs now, it's like you're going to have to go through a good team eventually. Sometimes you have to do it in the first round. Sometimes it's a second round. Like it's just there's no easy way to get through it. So as long as you're in the dance, you're fine. But I just and you know what? Even if you are a team that reeks of desperation to make these kinds of trades, you can get pretty creative now. Like you can find ways to get people's contracts and money that other teams don't necessarily want, and like you might actually be helping a team out, taking a player who makes some makes some cash. That it's not the traditional kind of demand that maybe we have seen in the past.
Yeah, and what we've also been talking about this week, Frank, is all these forwards who are still available in trade, most of them wingers, Marner, Natchez, Ehlers, Sekeres, even Laine, when teams were able to, speak to him more readily. So there is offense available here via trade in the NHL summer, because we anticipate most of, if not all, those guys are going to be finding new homes.
Yeah.
Right?
I guess I think Marner's running it back as a Maple Leaf. I think he's gonna do this year in Toronto. I don't know if there's gonna be, and this is just me speculating, like I have obviously no inside knowledge. I don't know what would warrant an extension for him until you see what it looks like in the playoffs. Like, what's he going to show you in the regular season that he hasn't showed you already, that would now say, oh, we'll give you the extension. Like, you kind of need to see what the playoffs looks like. So that might be scary for the Leafs. It might not be scary for Marner, because I think there's a big bag of cash waiting for him, if he signs an extension with Toronto or if he gets to market. The Natchez, Ehlers thing is interesting to me because you would think that would make sense if both those two guys maybe flipped, for each other. And I don't know the other pieces that would go each way, but, Ehlers would be going to Carolina, which would give them, a different look, up front. And then Natchez would go to Winnipeg, which would make sense for them because now they can sign him to a longer term ticket. Yes, they're going to have to pay him, but theoretically, if he plays well, and he plays, kind of in the price range that you're paying him, now you can buy up a lot of UFA years, which is important for the Jets because now they don't have a guy who's going to market in 2 and 3 years and maybe signing somewhere else. So that one makes sense on paper. And I think with Trevor Zegras, like I'm not, if I'm a GM, I'm probably not overly eager to give up much. Like I think he probably has more to his game that he needs to develop before I'm willing to give up significant assets. And Patrick Laine makes a lot of money. Like he makes $8.7 million and, great goal scorer. hasn't been able to score a lot just because he hasn't been healthy. So there's complications with that as well. So as much as there's names out there, there's just not, there's not a lot that makes sense maybe for Vancouver. But I think to Blake's point, because some of these deals are harder to make, even if you do look desperate, if you can find ways to kind of move some money around on your own books, and you can take that money off of someone else, maybe there is an easier deal to be made if you really had to make that deal. So I wouldn't worry too much, or I wouldn't get too hung up on maybe looking desperate in the eyes of other teams if things don't get off to a good start.
All right, buddy. Well, we're in the dead of NHL summer. I'm sure you
are
have
we ever?
a,
Yeah, are we ever?
I'm
We
very-
talked about weddings for 13 minutes today.
I was going to ask you. Let's bring it first. How many weddings are you going to this summer of teammates?
We have two. We have two
Only
this
two.
summer. The
Only
summer
two.
we did our reception, I think we had 12. I'm not even
No.
joking.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
12 weddings.
So we are in the window, right? Like these are the next 7 weeks or so where NHL players can get married, if I'm not
I
mistaken.
think, NHL players are just, I don't know. Everyone wants to get married seemingly this time of year.
No,
but
NHL players can't get married between September and June because the season is on. And of course, every one of them will be contesting a Stanley Cup final in June.
People don't want to get married between September and June.
Really?
Yeah. Everyone wants the perfect summer day for their wedding. You kidding me?
that's right, man. Some people will say they want a spring wedding, or maybe say they want a fall wedding, which I can buy the fall. Like I like the September wedding. But if you're a hockey player, you can't do it. You can't do it in June even, because
No.
what if you get traded to a team? Like you might look at your team and say, "Yeah, we're not winning shit this year." Meanwhile, you get traded somewhere and it's like, now now all of a sudden those deposits, they're sitting there, and the wedding will go on without you.
The best is the Tofino wedding. Total coin toss. It's either the most beautiful storybook wedding you've ever seen in your entire life, or it's a rain coming down sideways. Disaster. It's one of the two.
Yeah. Honestly, if you're going to book Tofino for your wedding, like you're the person who puts a large bet on black or red at the roulette table. Like you think nothing of walking into the casino before you check in and just dropping
It's one or the
500.
other. There's not many Tofino weddings. It's spectacular or disaster. One of the
That's not. I would not be able to live with that. That would keep me up at night.
Well,
There's a chance this thing goes sideways.
Well, especially given all the money and effort and energy and potentially stress that you're going to put into that.
I'll leave you guys on this. Okay, we started by talking about, is it more of a distraction after the wedding for players?
Yeah.
It's more of a distraction before the wedding.
Right.
Because you're dealing with the wedding planning, and that is more stressful than anything that comes after the wedding.
That's why the Oilers lost the Cup.
That's why.
It's all coming together. We just solved it right here.
It took us 28 minutes, but we cracked the case.
Thanks, Frank.
See you, Frank.
See you guys.
Hey, everybody, if you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres and Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash it right now.